Hello, Tuborowski. Well, today I thought I'd look at one of the essential libertarian shibboleths, that of non-force. That is, all conduct between persons is permissible, provided one does not initiate force. This is why the state is to be universally condemned, as it is nothing but organized force. Well, this argument has its share of holes, which is no surprise, and which I'll give some good examples of. First, let's see where this idea originated. The state is organized force, and the moral basis of early anarchism was that the state, being constructed on man's inhumanity and exploitation of man, was therefore illegitimate. It was no impartial referee, and any claims it could make in this regard, even constituted as a representative democracy, were a fraud. Even Marx said that the only purpose of the state was an instrument of class domination, and that when man was truly and finally liberated from the class struggle, society would have no need of the state, and it would wither away. So we see John Boehner, and his fellow teabaggers have more in common with Marx than Obama, the purported socialist president. They just want to jump the gun a bit and get there before the elimination of classes and exploitation between man and man. But I digress. No, I don't. Because that is the difference between Marx's utopian future under anarchist communism and the modern American offshoot of libertarianism. Grounded in Nietzsche's amoral individualism, as refined by Ayn Rand's objectivism, modern U.S.-style libertarianism is built upon the exploitation of man by man and permits it morally as long as force has not been initiated. This, in turn, is a bastardization of the nonviolent school of Thoreau, Tolstoy, and Gandhi, the advocates of soul force over physical force. Linking Gandhi's nonviolence with Nietzsche and Ayn Rand is possible only in the melting pot of the US&A, where ideas are uplifted from their point of origin and recombined in new forms only remotely descended from those origins. In practical terms, this modern American libertarian interpretation means that if I swindle you in a real estate transaction out of your life savings with a forged mortgage, as has happened to millions of North Americans the past couple of years, I have not done anything immoral because I have not initiated force. You can see the appeal of this ideology right away, why billionaire financiers love it especially, because it removes the moral basis of state regulation and the use of the state to recover losses engendered by this allowable behavior. If using the force of state power to punish this behavior in these persons is wrong by libertarian standards, what are you to do about it? Well, just be careful of what you sign, according to them, is all they have to say, because you are obligated by your alleged mutual contract. If these millions of homeowners were to combine and non-violently boycott the banks that sold them these tainted mortgages, even that would be initiating force, even without the state, because these aggrieved homeowners would be trying to coerce the banks in violation of their contract. You see the tainted nature of this backhanded attempt to justify exploitation in the name of free contract. It should come as no surprise that American libertarians are also against the post-1954 civil rights movement in the U.S. How can that be, you ask, when led by men like the Reverend Martin Luther King, the American Gandhi, and apostle of nonviolence, when its tactics like marches and sit-ins and ride-ins were based only on moral or soul force? Because the movement followed the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Topeka, mandating desegregation, and was possible in the southern U.S. only because it rested on federal law and the power of federal law enforcement, which is true. George Wallace backed down from his challenge of the auditorium door at the University of Alabama, not because of King's nonviolent marches at Selma, but because of a federal court order. Faced with a federal citation for contempt of court and thus the impeachment of his governorship and the end of his political career, Wallace's protest was offered only as a symbolic act of resistance to state tyranny, and he stepped aside. Modern U.S. libertarians, in my experience, will invariably take the state governor's side in this case against the larger federal entity, rather than the right of those two black students to freely enter the college. Why? Because their right had to be enforced by the federal court system and the federalized Alabama National Guard. So, we see the major intellectual flaw of the modern American libertarian interpretation of non-force doctrine. Present social conditions, from which these upper middle class and overwhelmingly white libertarians benefit, were based upon acts of force in past generations, the slave trade, violent suppression of strikes, the results of which have become embedded as status quo arrangements of social power for some and powerlessness for others. Backed by custom as much as law, these inherited social arrangements are themselves violently resistant to change. For this reason, it usually takes an equal amount of force to break the inherited injustice of their social power. So, to libertarians, it's the freedom riders defying bus segregation who are to be condemned for initiating force against the status quo of majority opinion, and not those citizens in or out of bed sheets who offered resistance to their aggression at the Birmingham Greyhound bus station. Libertarian is thus the philosophy of, among others, cheating bankers and segregationists who try to hide the swindle of their privileges based on their forefathers' initiation of force by demonizing those who would take back their own rights as aggressors. In this scenario, federal regulators and Lenin are on the same page. Interesting that those who condemn Lenin's use of force to initiate change have nothing to say about the Tsar's free use of wars, mass shootings, pogroms, and the forced labor exile system to resist change, just as they have nothing to say about General Pinochet's use of torture and murder in Chile, to lay the groundwork for their modern libertarian free economy. Uh-oh, he disturbs my morning rant today. Hello? John Brown? Thought you were busy bouldering in your grave. You know, with that beard, you bear a remarkable resemblance to Fidel Castro. You know, just like him, he used your constitutional right to bear arms and create a private resistance militia. But, well, yeah, anyway, it was you, Mr. Brown, who initiated force against private slave owners who lawfully enjoyed their property rights in a free contract between buyer and seller of human livestock. Well, you know and don't care because you act under a higher law than free contract? Well, now, according to our libertarian friends, there's no higher human or ethical value than that. And what's the slave got to do with it? He's private property. Well, now it doesn't matter if those slave owners' descendants now control the party where you were once a hero. And you know, any defrauded homeowners that would even try following your example, that would even think of violating property contract rights like you did, you know what would happen? They'd be strapped into Gitmo special detention centers quicker than you could yell Homeland Security. Not even the dignity of a hanging. They'd be guilty of using force, not the state, because then the state would be doing the only thing it should do, defending the right of free private contract. Yeah, well, I know it's confusing, contradictory, and hypocritical, and I'm not quite awake this morning and all that good stuff, but just keep in mind who's making up these rules and it all becomes clear. Your spirit's been laid to rest, so molder on.